It is day 6 of testimony in the dee-warner murder trial. I'm Melissa Andrews, a crime and investigative reporter covering the trial of dee-warner, who's accused of killing his wife Dee and then welding her inside a fertilizer tank where she was found 3 years later. Today, the jury got to see videos of Dale in the hours after his wife first disappeared, when her children were searching for her on Sunday, April 25th. And those videos were introduced mostly through a witness named Ivan Boyd. He is the 16th witness of this trial, the first of today. And Ivan Boyd used to work on the farm for about 4 years. He is also Zach Bach's fiance, who is dee-warner's son. Ivan's testimony was definitely the longest we've had so far. He says he was employed at Warrag Farms for about 4 years. He said his relationship with Dee depended on the day. She had good days and bad days. He also helped out with the trucking company, would run loads with deliveries and pickups sometimes when it was slow on the farm. Most of his work happened in the old shop, and that's where most of the tools and supplies were. He says that Dale was primarily responsible for chemical applications and anhydrous, planting, anything small and little that needed to be done on the weekends. He was asked, did Dale weld anything? He said once or twice. 2 others did the welding, including Jim Hawkins. So he met Zach Bach 2 months before working on the farm. He left the farm in June of 2021 and also left Zach, but then they reconciled in September of 2021. He said Dale would typically drive the Kubota in 2021. No one else drove this vehicle. The JCB, or front loader, was used to load fertilizer and various things around the farm. Typically, the welding was done in the old shop, Barn 1. There were several welders in there as well as in the new shop. He never saw any welding or did any welding in the spray barn, but the paint was kept there. Bottles of gas used for welding and gloves used for welding and torching as well. The forklift used for moving anhydrous tanks and pallets, as well as the power washer, were shown. He said he would typically work on Sundays, but not April 25th. He did go in because he had to work on radiator hoses on a truck that day, so he took his younger brother with him and got to the farm around mid to late morning. He mostly worked in the old shop that day and says he saw Dale 3 to 4 times that day. So we watched surveillance video from that day starting at 6:58 a.m. Again, this is April 25th. And at this point, no one knows that Dee is missing. Dale is shown in the JCB, or the front loader. He was asked, did that seem strange to you at first? He said yes. Then there was objection for relevance, and that was then stricken. Did you notice anything different about Mr. Warner? Well, he was not wearing a hat. We all wore hats. I've hardly ever seen him without a hat. The next image we see is about 7:30 a.m. and Dale's going back to the spray barn at 7:42. At 11:18, Dale is in the sprayer. At 12:43, Ivan and his brother are in a video when Dale comes in. He doesn't remember the conversation that day, except when Dale says he thought that Dee had left. Dale's Kubota is in this barn. He recognizes Dale based on the clothing and the posture in the photo or the video. At 12:51, the video is in the shop and Dale is in there. He is driving back to the spray barn in the Kubota. Jaron, his son, arrives in his truck and Dale is following him on the Kubota. At 1:13, it's going into the barn. Dale is in the storage shop in the back of the old shop, and there is an image of him near some welding supplies. He then gets back on the Kubota at 1:26 near the office, heading back toward the spray barn. At 1:46, he's on the sprayer. A semi is there, pictured at 2:46. Dale is on the Kubota. At 2:51, he's back by the scales. At 3:01, walking toward the scale around the corner of the office. At 3:18 on the Kubota. At 4:29, We see Todd Nahrink's pickup, and Dale is on the JCB at 4:32. At 4:52, he's looking at welding equipment in the old shop, or we're looking at welding equipment, but Dale is in there with a welder. You can see him walking out of the shop at 4:56. He now has a hat on. At 5:06, he's seen carrying a welding mask and gloves. At 6:41, the JCB goes by and there's a welder in the bucket, a blue welder and a gas tank that was yellow. He was asked, did you ever see an anhydrous tank inside the spray barn in the 4 years that you worked there? He said no. This would be uncommon. These tanks were stored, if they were full, along the driveway, and there were others stored at Carson Road and Paragon Road. We have a short break. We come back and we see an image, and Dale has some grinding discs. There's a big green toolbox with a welder next to it. At 6:43, Dale is with those same items in another pick. He's asked, did Dale ever leave notes? He looks at some notes with some exhibits. They were lined in loose leaf pages with handwriting. And there were 2 black notebooks and a pink notebook. And he said the writing appeared to be Dale's. This was never addressed with the tag that was on this tank and drawing the conclusion that that writing must be Dale's. That tag was never mentioned. And on cross-examination, they ask, did Dale ever get angry? He said maybe once, and that person absolutely deserved it. He apologized for it. He is laid back. He does not fly off the handle. He never lets his temper get to him, get the best of him. The tanks were made of steel. When you work with the tanks and anhydrous ammonia, you want to wear eye goggles and gloves and work upwind because it can burn your lungs. A plasma cutter cuts steel. At some point, Mr. Warner chats with you and says Mrs. Warner is missing and he was concerned. Is that correct? Yes. Is it fair to say everyone was in and out of there all the time? Yes. You don't dispute talking with him or putting trash into the bucket in the JCB. He says no. Everything was ordinary on the Munger farm that day. It was just another day. On redirect, he was asked, did you ever see Dale moving tanks? He said very rarely. He was told like, oh, you never saw him have a temper, but were you around him a lot? And he said no. He said he wasn't expected on the farm that day. It was a planned day off, but obviously he had some things to do. They talked about Dale's shirt. It was a short sleeve war egg uniform shirt. The prosecutor asked him, if you weld with a short sleeve shirt on, what will happen? He said, a welder burn. It's like a sunburn for welding continuously for about an hour. So they showed this picture, and then the defense objected to the picture being shown, but the damage was already done. So basically they're showing the picture of the hand and what is allegedly a welding burn that Dale had from apparently welding. That's the allegation on that day. They talked about the difference between an angle grinder and a plasma cutter. The angle grinder will cut a straighter cut. The angle grinder will also take a bit longer. The plasma will be the quicker of the two. The jury had some questions. The one that I thought was a good question was, does the plasma cutter need gas to function or cut? The answer is no. It uses an electrical current. I thought that was interesting just because we were talking about some sort of gas tank that accompanies this welder in some of these pictures. The 17th witness, the second of the day, is Jim Hawkins. He works at the Munger property to this day, and he's worked there since 2013. He said he's in charge of getting the anhydrous tanks ready to be used. He fills them up. He talks about that whole process. He said that he's never put an out of service note on a tank that's out of service, nor has he ever cut the end off a field anhydrous tank, and would never do that. He's also never painted an anhydrous tank, and said that you would never take a tank like this indoors to work on it. He would take the JCB down to the spray barn and take Dale's cans and bottles from his spraying about once or twice a week. He never saw tanks in the spray barn. On cross-examination, they said, you used the tanks that were on the property. He said, yes. They said, you interacted with both Mr. and Mrs. Warner. Were there good days with her and bad days with her? He said, correct. They said, would she scream and yell on bad days? He said, yes. They said, was Mr. Warner easy to get along with? He said, yes. On Saturday, the 24th, you worked until 7 p.m. Everything seemed okay on the farm. Yes. The jury questions, did you ever notice a fresh weld on the tank? No. Would exposure to anhydrous cause a burn on the skin? Yes, he said, but only the liquid. So what did we learn today? We learned in the hours before and after Dee was discovered missing, while her family searched for her, Dale was all over the property, and he was seen on camera with welding equipment. He was seen with an anhydrous tank in a barn where typically that wouldn't happen. You know, the defense came in and they really wanted us to know that Dee was the mean one and Dale was the nice one. They wanted us to know that people frequently came to the farm and were handling tanks. The Hardys filled up their tanks. They wanted people to know that, you know, these employees had these opinions, but they didn't work very closely with Dale or seem to know him personally. They certainly will have an opportunity to present their side of this whole story and any evidence that they would like to bring forth, although they're not required to do that. The next testimony is on Tuesday, starting at 9 a.m.